In the world today, people are surrounded by systems that contain them. A powerful government keeps people in check and makes sure that they are not acting in a way that could damage society. Sometimes when a government like this becomes too powerful, it becomes a repressive government and has a reverse effect on society, damaging it instead of helping it. A perfect example of this is George Orwell's dystopian novel 1984. In 1984, a large theme of the book is how the government completely controls the people living in Oceania. An abuse of government power is not as rare as it seems, and the book could be called prophetic for that simple fact. The repression of people and their rights as human beings has to do, for the most part, with an abuse of government power. This means that the government has grown to the point where it has too much power, and instead of using that power for good, it uses it to negatively affect the people. An abuse of government power can range from anything as insignificant as looking at a laptop camera for a few seconds to something as important and damaging as taking over a chunk of land where people live and kicking them all out. An example from 1984 of an abuse of power by the government is the use of telescreens to watch people. Telescreens are able to see and hear anything that's going on in the room, which is an invasion of privacy and an abuse of power. Another example could be the goods that the party manufactures and sells, such as Victory Gin and Victory cigarettes. The fact that the government is producing most of the basic goods that people need is an abuse of power, because this allows no other small businesses to start up and brings in more money for the government, further fueling its power. This abuse of government power is very much alive in the real world today. The prime example of this is North Korea, where people essentially have no rights. In North Korea, nobody is allowed in or out, except for a very few select people that are chosen by Kim Jong-un himself, who is the chairman of State Affairs Commission of North Korea, essentially just meaning the dictator. According to Kenneth Roth in the Human Rights Watch, the government routinely uses arbitrary arrest and punishment of crimes, torture in custody, and executions to maintain fear and control over the population. The government and security agencies systematically extract forced unpaid labor from its citizens, including women, children, detainees, and prisoners, to build infrastructure, implement projects, and carry out activities and events extolling the ruling Kim family and the Workers' Party of Korea. The North Korean government not only strips people entirely of their basic rights, they also treat them unfairly, torture them, and publicly execute them to send messages to the people, instilling thoughts of fear about the government instead of love. A government with that much power is not only dangerous to those living in the country, it's also very dangerous to outside countries who are not allies. A few years ago, the United States did not have good relations with North Korea, making them a serious threat to the country and the well-being of Americans. North Korea had even made warnings about possibly sending nuclear attacks, which would lead to the death of millions of Americans, along with millions of Korean deaths from the nuclear strike that the U.S. would send as retaliation. Another good example of an abuse of power was the Nazi Party. The Nazi Party was formed on February 24th of 1920 in Munich, Germany, but was only really known about from World War II, which started on September 4th, 1939 with the invasion of Warsaw, Poland. The Nazis were brutal in their attacks, completely abusing their military power on countries that would stand no chance fighting against a superpower like them. The party in 1984 was not talked about so much as a military power, but it's inferred that they were because of how much of the world belonged to them. The Nazis are also related to the party in how they controlled their people that were under their rule. Just like the party, the people who were stuck under the power of them were treated terribly and were stripped of their rights as human beings. Anyone who went against the Nazis, which in their case meant just being a minority like the Jews or the Gypsies, were either put into ghettos or labor camps. Ghettos were cities that were captured and repurposed to act as holding facilities for people that the Nazis did not think they'd need for their plan to capture the world. The labor camps wound up just being death camps where the Nazis would try to get as much out of people before they were killed. George Orwell most likely based part of what the party was like after the Nazis, considering they were very important in the world during the time of him writing his book. The North Korean government also shares many similarities with the party, including changing the news to make the government seem better than it is, torturing and killing people because they said something negative about the government, and taking away basic human rights from the people. With all of these facts about abusive and repressive governments, it's safe to say that 1984 could have almost acted as a prophecy for the future of what the world would be like.